Have you ever looked into someone's eyes and seen that flicker of panic? That moment when they realize you know? You know the truth they've been hiding, the lie they've been living, the mask they've worn for years. And in that instant, they can't hide anymore. Their world shifts. And yours? Yours becomes stronger. The truth has a strange power. It doesn't shout. It doesn't need to prove itself. It simply is. And when you carry it not as a weapon, but as a compass, the people who once thought they could manipulate you go insane wondering how you saw through them. Today, I want to show you exactly why that happens, and how you can live in such alignment with truth that you become untouchable. When you operate from a place of clarity, there's something extraordinary that happens. Things that used to confuse you no longer have that power. You see, people who manipulate for a living, people who thrive in distortion, are not masters of truth, they are masters of fog. They want the waters muddy because in murky waters you can't see where you're swimming, and you don't know what's swimming toward you. They require you to live in that state of uncertainty, where every step you take feels like it could collapse beneath you, and you're constantly looking to them to tell you which way is up. But when you start to see things as they really are, not as you're told they are, everything begins to shift. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's almost quiet. You simply stop believing the stories they feed you. You begin to question without announcing that you're questioning. You begin to notice patterns you were once too distracted to see. You realize that the inconsistencies in their words aren't just mistakes, they're signals. And once you see those signals, you can't unsee them. It's not about having some big confrontation, standing on a soapbox, and declaring you've uncovered the lies. That's what most people imagine truth looks like, some grand revelation. But the real power of truth is far more subtle. You stop engaging in the dance. You stop responding the way they expect you to respond. You don't rise to the bait anymore. And here's where it becomes interesting. They feel it. They feel the control slipping away before you even say a word. That's why they panic. That's why they become agitated, defensive, maybe even more aggressive. It's because you've shifted from being someone they can influence to someone they can't read. And people who live by manipulation cannot stand what they can't read. Now, silence. This is where the transformation deepens. We live in a culture that tells us to speak up, to defend ourselves, to fight our corner. And yes, there are times when you must speak. But when you truly know the truth, silence can become a force far greater than any argument. See, if you engage with someone whose only aim is to twist your words, you've already lost. You're playing in their arena with their rules, and their rules are designed to ensure they always win. But when you refuse to step onto that battlefield, they have nothing to fight. They swing at the air, and the air does not fight back. It's maddening for them because they can't pull you into their cycle of reaction and defense. People expect outrage. They expect anger. They expect you to try to prove them wrong. They've prepared for that. But when you simply don't give them the engagement they crave, they are left staring at the void. And the void reflects something back to them they don't want to see, their own powerlessness. They can't push your buttons anymore because you've removed the wiring. They can't provoke you because you've built a wall they cannot scale, one made not of aggression, but of quiet certainty. This doesn't mean you're weak. In fact, it's the opposite. It takes enormous strength to hold your tongue when every nerve in your body wants to respond. It takes discipline to allow someone to sit in the discomfort of their own lies without trying to correct them or drag them toward honesty. And it takes wisdom to know that your peace is worth more than their validation. When you get to this point, you no longer need them to see the truth, because you see it. You've already won, but not in the way the world usually defines victory. You've won because you've taken back your mind. You've reclaimed the space where they used to plant doubt, fear, and confusion. The reason this drives them to the brink is because they don't just lose control over the situation. They lose control over you. And if their power depends on being able to predict and provoke you, losing that is like cutting off their air supply. They will scramble. They will try new tactics. They will poke and prod to see if the old you is still in there, waiting to react. And each time you stay steady, they lose a little more of their grip. This is not about becoming cold or indifferent. It's about becoming grounded in something far deeper than the push and pull of their manipulation. It's about stepping into a space where you see reality for what it is and you refuse to let anyone distort it for you again. You are not obligated to defend the truth to those committed to denying it. You are not obligated to rescue people from the consequences of their own dishonesty. And you are certainly not obligated to keep dancing in the fog when you've learned to breathe in the clear air. When you hold to that, you'll see something remarkable. Those who once thought they had you figured out will look at you like a puzzle they can no longer solve. And that, for them, is unbearable. We live in a time where the word intuition often gets dismissed as if it's some airy, unreliable impulse, something that belongs in the realm of guesswork or fantasy. But that's a profound misunderstanding. Intuition is the oldest survival tool you have. It's the part of your mind that's been honed over thousands of years to detect patterns before they're obvious, to recognize danger before you can put it into words. It's not magic. It's the subconscious mind processing an enormous amount of data, most of which your conscious mind can't keep track of in the moment. The way someone's eyes shift when they're speaking, the slight hesitation before they answer, the way their tone changes when certain topics come up. These are the breadcrumbs. And you notice them, even if you don't realize you're noticing them. That's why you get that uneasy feeling without having a clear reason. But here's the problem. We've been trained to dismiss that unease. We've been told to give people the benefit of the doubt, to explain away the small inconsistencies, to believe we're being too sensitive. And the more you override that instinct, the more you teach yourself to live in a state of self-doubt. That's what the wrong people want you to do. Ignore your inner alarms until you can no longer hear them. Because once you stop trusting your gut, you have to trust them. And that's exactly where they want you. The shift happens when you stop apologizing for what you feel. When you start saying, I don't know exactly why, but something about this doesn't sit right with me. And you honor that instead of dismissing it. You don't need to have a complete case file before you decide to step back. You don't have to wait for proof, to act on what your deeper mind already knows. You can learn to see your intuition as an early warning system, not as a weakness. And when you act on it, people who were counting on you to stay blind will be left scrambling. They'll call you paranoid. They'll accuse you of overthinking. They'll try to shame you back into doubt. But remember, your intuition is not about convincing them. It's about protecting you. The more you trust it, the sharper it gets. You'll start to notice that you're able to read situations faster, make better decisions, and avoid traps before you even see them fully forming. And that's where the real shift in power happens. Because if someone's influence over you depends on you ignoring your inner signals, and suddenly you're acting on those signals, you become impossible to manipulate. That's when they start to lose control, and they know it. Now, boundaries, this is where truth stops being abstract and becomes concrete. A boundary is not something you announce. It's something you enforce. It's the line you draw between what you will and will not allow in your life. And here's the thing. Boundaries have a way of revealing truths people never intended to show you. The moment you set one, you're essentially holding up a mirror. The people who respect you will see it as a sign of strength and clarity. They'll work within it. They'll honor it without needing a debate. But the people who have been using your lack of boundaries to take advantage of you, they'll push. They'll question it. They'll make you feel guilty for having it. This is the part that often shocks people. The way someone reacts to your boundaries tells you more about them than months of conversation ever could. You'll see in real time whether they value you as a person or as a resource they can exploit. And once you see that, it becomes nearly impossible to unsee. That's the beauty of boundaries. They aren't just for protection. They're diagnostic. They show you who people really are when they can no longer get their way without respecting you. Enforcing boundaries doesn't require cruelty or aggression. In fact, the most effective ones are calm, consistent, and non-negotiable. You don't shout them from the rooftops or threaten people with them. You simply live by them. If someone crosses the line, you act. Not in anger, but with certainty. And when you do that, you send a signal that resonates far beyond the immediate situation. You're telling the world that you know your value, and you're not willing to compromise it to keep the wrong people comfortable. And here's where boundaries and intuition intersect. Often your boundaries will be born from that same quiet knowing your intuition gave you. You might not be able to fully articulate why a certain behavior bothers you, but you know it does. You know it chips away at your peace, your self-respect, your stability. So you draw the line. And when you do, you discover something profound. The right people will never make you feel wrong for having it. The wrong people will try to convince you it's unfair. That's all you need to know. When you start trusting your inner signals and backing them with outer action, you move from being a passive observer of your life to being an active guardian of it. You become someone who doesn't just see the truth, you lives it. And for those who once thrived on your confusion, that's not just inconvenient. It's unbearable. When you finally reach that point where you no longer crave their approval, it's as if a chain you didn't even know you were carrying snaps in two. For so long, that desire for their acceptance, whether it was a partner, a friend, a boss, or even a family member, kept you tethered. It made you compromise pieces of yourself, soften your truths, or bite your tongue just to maintain the illusion of harmony. You told yourself it was worth it, that peace was better than conflict, that being liked was better than being alone. But the reality is, every time you bent yourself to fit into their expectations, you chipped away at your own identity. And that's a slow death. Detachment doesn't mean you stop caring entirely. It means you stop giving them the power to define your worth. That shift is enormous because so much of manipulation relies on you needing something from them. Their praise, their validation, their acknowledgement that you matter. Once that hook is gone, they have nothing to dangle in front of you. You stand on your own ground, not theirs, and suddenly you can see the landscape for what it really is. You begin to notice that their approval was never stable. It shifted based on what benefited them. And you begin to realize you were never actually secure in it. When you detach, you stop performing. You stop trying to anticipate what they want to hear or who they want you to be. You start saying no without the reflexive guilt that used to follow you around. And here's where it gets interesting. The moment you stop chasing, they start reacting. They'll test you. They'll try to pull you back into that old dynamic by offering what they think you still want. They might give you sudden bursts of affection or praise, hoping to hook you again. Or they might turn cold, trying to punish you into compliance. But because you've stepped away emotionally, those tactics start to feel obvious. You see the game in real time, and it loses its pull. Detachment gives you space to remember who you are without their voice in your head. You rediscover the things that genuinely matter to you, not the things you pretended mattered to keep them happy. It's uncomfortable at first. Freedom often is, because it means you're no longer anchored to someone else's perception of you. But over time, that discomfort turns into strength. You stop looking to others to tell you you're enough, because you know you're enough without their confirmation. And that's when their control is gone for good. And then there's the other shift, the one that happens when you stop explaining yourself to people who aren't interested in understanding you. This is a hard one because many of us have been taught from a young age that if we just explain ourselves well enough, people will see our side, they'll come around, they'll treat us better. But here's the truth. People who are committed to misunderstanding you will never be convinced, no matter how clear you are. They're not asking for clarification to build a bridge. They're asking for ammunition to tear you down. When you stop explaining, you force them to stand on their own without your constant input to work against. You remove the oxygen from their fire. For those who thrive on twisting your words, this is deeply frustrating. They can't spin what you don't give them. They can't argue against a silence that refuses to engage. This isn't about giving the cold shoulder or playing games. It's about conserving your energy for people and conversations that are worth having. Think about how much time you've spent in your life crafting careful explanations, trying to make sure you're not misunderstood, bending over backwards to make your intentions clear. And how often did that effort change anything with the people who were determined to see you in a distorted way? Probably never. That's because their interpretation of you has nothing to do with your clarity. It has everything to do with their agenda. And once you realize that, you stop wasting your breath. This act of not explaining is a form of self-respect. It says, I know who I am, and I don't need your agreement to validate it. It's not arrogance, it's stability. It's standing firm in your own reality without needing permission to do so. And the beauty of it is that the people who are genuinely for you will never require endless explanations. They'll ask for understanding when it's needed, but they won't weaponize your words. People reveal themselves quickly when you stop giving them what they can manipulate. Those who value you will meet you where you are. Those who only value control will grow frustrated, maybe even hostile. And that's the gift, because then you can see clearly who belongs in your life and who doesn't, without all the noise of their justifications clouding your vision. When detachment and the refusal to over-explain come together, you reach a place of incredible clarity. You're no longer trying to win over those who were never invested in your well-being. You're no longer bleeding energy into battles that have no resolution. You're living from a place of quiet strength, and that strength speaks louder than any defense you could ever mount. The people who once had an easy hold on you will find they can't reach you anymore, and that distance, emotional, psychological, even spiritual, becomes your greatest protection. In a world where so many people hide behind masks, shift their stories, and bend their morals to fit the moment, someone who consistently acts from a place of principle is profoundly unsettling. There's a certain predictability to living by truth. Not the kind that makes you boring or easy to manipulate, but the kind that makes you impossible to bait. You won't be tricked into sudden emotional reactions because you're not operating from impulse. You're operating from alignment. You're not swayed by flattery one day and fear the next. You have a framework for decision-making that isn't based on who's watching, who's approving, or who's offering the quickest reward. And for people who live by deception, that kind of steadiness is a nightmare. They rely on volatility. They thrive when others are reactive, because a reactive person is a predictable person. If they can make you angry, they can control the tone of the conversation. If they can make you desperate for their approval, they can dictate your behavior. But when you are rooted in truth, the buttons they use to press don't work anymore. You don't rise to their bait, you don't play their games, and you don't take the paths they try to herd you down. You respond the same way in private as you do in public. Your yes means yes, your no means no, and it doesn't matter who's asking or what's at stake. That's terrifying to someone whose life is built on manipulation, because it means they can't get you to move with fear or temptation. This predictability isn't about being rigid. It's about being anchored. When you live by truth, you can adapt without losing yourself. You can compromise without compromising your integrity. You can listen without absorbing someone else's distortion. And that makes you not just harder to manipulate, but harder to even approach with hidden motives. People with ill intentions often test others with small breaches first. Tiny moral compromises, subtle manipulations, little lies to see if you'll play along. When you respond with consistent honesty, you send a message. This is solid ground. If you want to walk here, you'll have to walk straight. And that's enough to drive some people away entirely. But here's the thing, you don't need them to stay. You don't need their cooperation or even their approval to keep living by your principles. The truth sustains itself, and you sustain yourself by living within it. Over time, this creates a quiet confidence that speaks louder than any defense you could ever mount. The deceptive hate that. They hate that your stability makes them unstable, that your clarity makes their fog more obvious, and that your predictability exposes their inconsistency without you having to lift a finger. And then there's the final realization, the one that frees you from the endless loop of confrontation, proof-seeking, and emotional exhaustion. Sometimes, simply knowing is enough. You don't need the public confession. You don't need the dramatic apology. You don't even need to prove to anyone else that you were right. The truth, once it's in you, becomes its own form of closure. This is one of the hardest lessons to learn because everything in you may want justice, acknowledgement, a reckoning. You want them to see what they did, to admit it, to validate your experience. But here's the cold reality. Some people will never give you that, not because you don't deserve it, but because giving it would mean facing themselves. And they'd rather live in the comfort of their lies than in the discomfort of their own conscience. When you let go of that need, you reclaim an enormous amount of energy. You stop replaying conversations in your mind, thinking about what you should have said. You stop scanning for evidence to prove what you already know. You stop bargaining with yourself about whether maybe they didn't mean it. Maybe it wasn't as bad as it seemed. You stop all of that because you already have the truth, and the truth is enough to make your decisions, set your boundaries, and move forward. This doesn't mean the truth will erase the pain. It often doesn't. But it will strip away the confusion, and confusion is the real prison. Once you're clear, you can act decisively. You can choose to step away, to cut ties, to protect yourself without needing to justify it to anyone who wasn't there to live it with you. And you can do it without hatred, because hatred still ties you to the person or situation you're leaving behind. Knowing the truth lets you walk away clean, without dragging their chaos into your future. And here's the quiet, almost cruel irony for those who once held power over you. They will spend far more time thinking about you than you will about them. They'll be caught in a cycle of wondering what you know, how you found out, and what you might do with that knowledge. They'll create scenarios in their mind, trying to guess if you've told anyone, if you'll come back, if you'll retaliate. That wondering, that gnawing uncertainty, becomes their prison. Meanwhile, you're free. You're not thinking about them because you no longer need anything from them, not their truth, not their apology, not their recognition. You've taken the one thing they can't reclaim from you, your clarity. And that's the kind of victory they can't touch. The truth doesn't just set you free, it makes you untouchable. And the moment you live by it, the people who relied on your ignorance will have no idea how to reach you anymore. If this spoke to you, if you've ever felt that shift where you finally saw through someone's game, drop your story in the comments. I want to hear it. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to remember their strength, and subscribe so you never miss a conversation that challenges the way you see yourself and the world. And tell me, what's the next truth you want us to explore together?